You making some ribs?
I'm making some ribs.
What kind of ribs are you making?
I'm making 2 racks of beef and 1 rack of pork.
We almost didn't record because you're making ribs.
We almost didn't, but we adjusted some times and we got it figured out.
You want to bring me some ribs?
I'll fly them over. When we go to the second part, I need a basting break, if you don't mind.
And with that music straight out of the Van Nuys Top 10, you know it's going to be a fun hour. Welcome back. Podcasting on a Plane. I'm Brandon Gonzalez, and you're with me here in the Delta, broadcasting as always. And I say it each and every time, but you know what? Something actually kind of surprises me about this. I was thinking, I have not ever had anybody call into real West Coast Delta Tower addressing it as such. Not yet, at least. I'm just kind of casually waiting for it to happen. I mean, it's not a challenge, it's not a prize or anything, but you know what I usually do with VHF shoutouts, right? Well, as the music promises, you know who's here. The one and only Chad Fortenberry. But today with a twist. And that's because we're answering your questions. That's right. We're not just talking or BSing or whatever. We actually have a bunch of questions straight from you. And a few patrons in this case, they send in some stuff. And instead of just hearing my thoughts, you're going to get Chad's too. But there's a lot of flying stuff, a lot of air traffic. And between the two of us, you might actually get a decent answer. Don't go away.
No, I didn't mess with the seat. Certain avionics slash airframe and power plant place messed with that seat. First of all, the seat was good initially. It slipped out of place at some point. It was written up at an annual, but only half of the Velcro was put back on it instead of the other half, so it doesn't line up. And then that seat slides.
That's a bummer. I think the plane needs to go somewhere else.
I think it does too.
All right, we got Chad back on the show today, and it's time to saddle up because Chad made some ribs, and I got a bunch of listener feedback. What do you think, Chad? You want to do this?
Absolutely.
What kind of ribs did you make?
I got 2 racks of beef on the grill. I got 1 rack of pork ribs, and both of them are done in brisket rub. I use a nice base on there. It's got red wine vinegar, pineapple juice, and apple juice. Basted them up real nice, and then threw some brisket rub on that. Smoke them for about 2 hours, and I'll baste after the first hour once, and then I'll baste about 20 minutes, and then about 40 minutes after that, I'll baste it again. I'll pull them off just a hair over 2 hours, and I'll wrap them up in some brown sugar barbecue sauce, butter, and some more baste.
So what you're saying is we can't make this episode longer than 2 hours?
Well, we can.
Are you going to need to take a basting break, Chad?
I will have to take a basting break. Actually, I'd have to pull them off and wrap them, and then I'll put them back on the grill for about 4 hours.
Nice. All right. Well, what have you been up to the last couple weeks since we last heard from you?
Well, the last couple of weeks have been great. We picked up a new Challenger 350. Our 300 Challenger is in pre-buy up at West Star and Grand Junction. 350 we picked up over at Dallas Love, went up to Wichita, closed that deal. We have it. We're getting the interior completely redone on it. They pulled it out, I think part of it Friday, and they're pulling the rest out Monday. Then we're taking it Thursday when we get back from Monterey. We're going to take it over to the paint shop. It's going to get the same paint job that our 300 had put on it. Dang.
So you've been flying a lot?
Been flying quite a bit. I've done a couple of recurrents. Just got done with one in a 700 Alpha TBM. That was great. Did another recurrent for a guy in an 850 G1000 TBM. And just other than that, it's been our normal Citation 10 Challenger flying to and from Monterey over to Little Rock.
Right on. Well, I put out a little thing to the patrons of the show, and I'm going to probably put out to the public here in a little bit about what people sort of check in annually or so. Like, hey, what about this show is really, what do you think? You want to hear more of something, less of something, whatever. And a couple people said they might want more Chad. And I got a bunch of other comments too, and we're going to get kind of, maybe a little bit deep into this, but technically advanced aircraft commercial, let's see, getting current in a multi-engine aircraft, being only current in a multi-engine aircraft, and if we can get more Blackbird content. I'm going to need some help with that.
All right.
Yeah, those are harder to come by. All right, man. So let's go right into this. I have from Glen Towler. He says, I enjoy your podcast and mostly the Blackbird and Concorde series so much, and more of that would be awesome. Well, I will do my best to get more Blackbird and Concorde content, but as airplanes have stopped flying decades ago, that's going to be tough. But I'll tell you what, Glenn, if I could do nothing but Blackbird and Concorde stuff, that would be amazing. But for now, you're going to have to take me and Chad flying at 510 and the Citation 10. Actually, tell me about that story. I put that on Instagram. How did you get up there?
Well, we took off out of Dallas, Addison. We were going up to Kalamazoo, actually delivering that airplane. The gentleman I fly with sold it to a client of his that's up there. We took off, and I noticed John had filed for 43 because he did the flight plans. And we got up to 43, and I looked at John and I told him, him and I in the airplane, and we were pretty light. We just had a load to get up to Kalamazoo. And told him, I said, look, let's go to 51 today. The air's not too cold. You can't, when it gets past 65, minus 65 up there, those engines don't do real well. There's a point in which too cold is bad. It was not too cold, and it was smooth. It was nice. I said, what the heck? Let's just try 51. We took that thing up to 51, and we ran 8.0 for about 20 minutes.
Did the controller think that was weird when they cleared you that high? And was anybody else up there?
Well, there was a couple of comments made. Don't know what airlines they were, but they were definitely airline guys, 510. And there's only a few airplanes that can go up to 510 that aren't military. I think Gulfstreams do it, a couple of them. The 10 does it. Forget which Learjet can do it, or which Learjets can do it. Not all of them can. And something else. But it's not too common to go up there. The 10 we were flying up there has the winglets on it. If you don't have the 10 with winglets, I know some people that have gone to 510, but they couldn't stay because the airplane, it couldn't keep the speed. The wing can't fly. But when you added the winglets, the wing flies fine. And we did 8.0 up there.
All right, our next little bit of feedback here comes from Evan Schoo, and he says, hey, BG, thanks for the update. I enjoyed the journalism discussion with Rob. He likes to play the funny guy most of the time, but underneath that lighthearted exterior lives a deep thinking and well-considered wordsmith. Thanks for sharing that discussion with us. Well, he says you're welcome. Actually, Evan, I sent that to Rob, and he said thank you so much for that. Evan's question, though, is he says, I'm in a position that after 10 years of flying singles, I might have the opportunity to do a multi-engine endorsement in a moderately cost-effective manner. He's in a different country, by the way. He says, is there a chance that you could discuss, in general terms, of course, the pros and cons of undertaking that type of training, considering that I'm not a commercial pilot? Is it tricky for a private pilot to maintain proficiency in both single and multi-engine platforms? And maybe discuss your first multi-engine flying experience. Thanks. So to that, I'd say, the pros and cons are, the biggest pro is that it's fun to fly multi-engine airplanes, right?
It is. It's a blast.
And if you ever want to go professional, that's pretty much a prerequisite. Yes, there are, I suppose, a couple of jobs out there you could get where you're getting paid where you're only ever going to fly singles. But, that's most of the time, unless you're going to start like an ag business or parachute jumping or, a couple other kind of outliers, that's not really going to work. So it's going to be a prerequisite no matter what. And, did I mention it's fun? But the con is that obviously just the money. That's the first one is it is stupendously expensive to fly these airplanes that were built in a different time where fuel prices were different and the attitude towards a lot of things was different. And, they were maybe cost effective back then, although still very expensive. But now, I mean, most multi-engine trainers, you're looking at $250 an hour just for the plane or more, and then an instructor on top of that. So you're in the $300 or $400 an hour range, at least where I'm at. So luckily it doesn't take that long, but I think most of the 141 courses out there are about 15 hours long. Obviously you could do it in less time under Part 61, but should you, that's a different case. And I guess that would be the other con, is that, flying light multi-engine aircraft is fun, but it's sort of like playing with knives or playing with fire. I mean, if you lose an engine, you're kind of in a world of hurt. It's not the same as like in a jet or something like that with a rudder bias system and so on. I mean, you lose an engine in a Seminole, you've got just enough power to flip you over backwards. When it comes to maintaining proficiency, I mean, that's not really a problem. I mean, go do your 3 takeoffs and landings in a multi-engine airplane and there you go. I mean, and again, we just come back to the price of things. I mean, you got to go out and probably pay for that. But I mean, I would say if you can find a way to do it, do it. But, for me, there was a time where I was only current in multi-engine aircraft, and I thought that was kind of cool. But that was short-lived, and now I'm back to mostly singles. But, I think if you can get a multi-engine rating and you're in a position to do it, I would definitely pull the trigger on that. And, before I go into my first multi-engine experience, which was actually pretty cool, what do you think about that, Chad?
First multi-engine experience?
Oh, no, I mean, about the other stuff, pros, cons, things like that, and then we'll get into our first experiences.
I've got some good advice on the multi-engine. We can take care of anything in this world we want to, as long as commas and zeros are not an issue. When commas and zeros become an issue, yes, multi-engine gets super expensive. If you throw that out the window, if you can afford to have a single and a multi-engine airplane, that's cool. My advice on the whole situation would be this. If you have a single engine private pilot's license with an instrument rating, get your multi-commercial rating. And that level of proficiency will do 2 things for you. Number 1, your knowledge and skills will be increased through getting your multi-commercial versus a multi-private. Number 1. Number 2, your insurance will be drastically less if you own a multi-engine airplane and hold a multi-commercial license. Number 3, your single commercial becomes increasingly easy to obtain after that. Therefore, you could take one simple check ride in the single after you got your multi-commercial, and you have both a single and multi-commercial, and your insurance is exponentially less at that point as well.
All right, there we go. What about your first multi-engine? What was it like?
My first multi-engine was 2202 X-Ray, Piper Seminole, Monarch Air, Addison Airport, Dallas, Texas, or Addison, Texas. It was great. My instructor was Patrick McClure. We went over to Fort Worth Alliance. We watched F-18s. We watched F-16s. We watched a couple of heavies, a couple of Talons. And then we flew some more multi. Just 2 engines working, no failures, nothing like that. Real simple. Just flying around with 2 working. And flew back to Addison. And I loved it.
Right on. I don't know if I should even share this story. Okay, my first multi-engine experience. I worked at the airport in Telluride, Colorado when I was 15 years old, and that's not new information to the listeners of the podcast, but I had this small obsession with one of the airplanes in the hangar, 5 Whiskey Charlie, and it was a Cheyenne, which, I don't know, Cheyennes are weird, but, they're cool. I mean, I can't think of a smaller airplane with 2 turbine engines on it, but it was neat, and sometimes I'd crawl around and just check it out. I wish I could fly it, but it was owned by a wealthy rancher in Colorado, but it was flown by a gentleman named Peter Alert, and people that are in the aviation community will definitely probably know about him, or at least the journalistic community, because he's a long-time and very well-known aviation writer. He has a couple pen names he's used, but you can sort of see through that. But anyway, Peter is also a very experienced pilot, and he was going on a Part 135 check ride. So the way this worked was we were going to drop off the examiner down in Durango, which from Telluride and Cheyenne is I don't know, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, it's nothing. So I begged and begged. And then one of my coworkers, he said, hey, what were the chances you could just have some ballast in the back seat? And he agreed. So I got to sit in the back seat of the Cheyenne while Peter went on his Part 135 something or other ride where he just needed to go point A to point B, do an ILS or whatever, drop someone off. And then on the way back, he let me fly the Cheyenne. I got to sit right seat, which was probably my first time in the right seat or ever trying to fly an airplane from the right seat. And he let me fly the Cheyenne from Durango to Telluride, which I'll tell you what, for a 15-year-old kid to try to fly a Cheyenne from Durango to Telluride, Colorado from the right seat for the first time, it was one of the most memorable, we'll call it, aviation experiences I've ever had. But I was not good. I tried to hold my altitude within 200 or 300 feet, and it was barely able to do it. I mean, we were VFRs, it didn't matter, but he let me fly it, and obviously not land. He did the landing, but that was one of my most memorable aviation experiences, flying with somebody of his credentials and also in a twin turbine aircraft for my first time in a multi-engine airplane. It was insane, but I knew I was hooked because I couldn't wait to do it again and make it into a career.
That's pretty cool. I didn't realize the other listeners may that you worked at the Telluride airport. That's
yeah, man, that's cool. Where I'm from. That was one of my first real jobs. Yeah.
Yeah, I knew you were from Telluride. I knew you had lived there. I just didn't realize that you worked at the airport and did all that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, too. If anybody ever goes there, big shout out to Rich Nuttall from me. He's the airport manager there. He's been the manager for, well, geez, that was 1995. So I think a year before that or something, he became the manager, maybe even a couple years before that. So he's been there for forever, seen through runway constructions and everything. But big shout out to him for giving me my first aviation job. I'll definitely never forget that.
This is a little off subject, but you mentioned runway constructions. Have you been back since they actually fixed it?
I have not been on the brand new, quote unquote, fixed runway yet. I landed there right before they did that project, and my dad and I went on a ski trip, and that was the last time I've been there. That was a couple years ago, but I've seen a lot of pictures of it.
Yeah, it's nice.
I'll tell you what, we should do a runway to runway, new to new. We should go Catalina, where they built a new runway out there, and then land in Telluride with a new, quote unquote, new runway there. That'd be a good flight for us.
Yeah, we should do that.
Yeah, it'd be cool. You know, I always thought I've done this kind of thing like one time before, but you know, where you lift off of like a dirt strip and then land at somewhere like LAX and just like leave a little dirt from the lake bed you took off on 25 left. I think that's cool. It's just like one of those aviation things you could just do, and you're like, wow, I can't believe we just did that. Right on.
Yeah, for the folks at LAX, I think that ought to be the highlight of their day.
All right, our next little bit of feedback comes from Brooks Dorroh. He's actually a local guy around here in San Diego. He says, I understand all the crazy environment we're currently experiencing, and I've enjoyed all your podcasts along the way, including the Boeing series. And being recently IFR rated about 18 months ago, I'm always interested in subject matter related to the IFR system. Tech routes, which is something that's really popular in Southern California here, by the way. They're awesome, and prior to the instrument rating, I had no idea what they are. But that said, one of the things that I'm still not clear on is the GPS direct routes and how to try to file or how to file that once you're out of the tech route areas. So I've been filing airways when on longer trips, but I think there's something I'm missing about using the GPS direct routing if it'd be advantageous, especially if I'm going northeast in the Sierras versus the airways, of course, that are published. Anyway, that'd be a topic I'd like to hear more about in order to use the NAS as efficiently as possible. What do you think?
Well, first of all, I would tell you, look at a sectional chart and look at the sea of blue out there in California, especially over the San Joaquin Valley, around Lemoore, etc. There's not a whole lot of space out there, in my opinion, just for the allowance of some of the GPS direct stuff. I know it exists out there. I just take what ATC gives me and fly it. And just note that when you're IFR, you're not going through any MOAs or any active MOAs. You know, altitudes, of course, and whether the MOA is hot or not, going through Joshua, going through, you know, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not too sure what you're flying in or what this gentleman's flying in. However, I've never put too much thought into that. I really do like that the tech routes are nice, and I really, you know, the tower and route stuff is awesome. the GPS direct stuff, I'll be honest, I've never really had much experience using it, but I've never really needed to or had the desire to do it.
Yeah. All right. Well, for those of you who are listening out there that are not familiar with the tech routes, let's hit that first. So tower en route control, or tower to tower sometimes it's called, was in smaller areas, like maybe, let's say Dallas. I say that jokingly, like Dallas is a small place, but the idea that you could have an IFR flight where you just got to pop over to an airport, 2 airports over, it'd be like less than 20 miles maybe, right? But you got to go IFR for whatever reason. So there would be a way that you could do that with, no obstacles in between or whatever. And why couldn't you just kind of go tower to tower, just have the towers hand you off and just sort of keep lobbing the volleyball down to the airport you're going to, right? But that really isn't what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is in Southern California in particular, probably the most robust tech route structure there is all of the towers. You don't need to pre-file. You can just say, hey, I want to go up to, I'm at San Diego and I want to go up to Van Nuys. And there's going to be a published in the chart supplement, formerly AFD, or in your ForeFlight or whatever EFB you use, and they're all loaded into flightplan.com or whatever, where it's going to be like what we call a canned routing. So you're going to get this route. It's going to be this VOR, this airway, this radial, this fix, and then it's going to dump you off at a VOR or a final approach fix for an approach near an airport, right? So you don't even need to really pre-file. We can just type that straight in. And when I'm typing it into the FIDO system, I just go like SAN or CRQ or wherever you departed, .. VNY, enter, and it prints out the route. And then it's going to be the same each time. So you can plan for it and you're going to get it, which is the bonus side. The bummer side is that it's always going to be that routing no matter what. So, if you want, and with a specific altitude, by the way. So there's going to be a whole lot of situations where, you might want a different altitude and we can try to coordinate that. But the reason it's done is because there are so many airplanes going every which way on all these airways that it needs to be procedurally separated, because no amount of controllers at SoCal Tracon could possibly just have airplanes going on these direct routings all over the place at whatever altitude they prefer, especially with LAX and Santa Ana and San Diego flow and all that. It's impossible. So these routes have been made so that you can have, an expectation and there's just a system in place, and it makes things really easy. But again, once you get out into the much bigger NAS, you're going to have preferred routes. So like if you want to go from Chicago to New York, there are some preferred routes, and we all know that in the back of the supplement as well. So you should probably file that. You'll probably get it. But if you need something else, it's probably approvable, and you can probably get a different routing. But not in Southern California. It's not going to work that way. So to the idea of how to file GPS routes, you can file fixes, and that'll usually work really well. Some of the flight planners out there, I remember, used to do like the GPS direct routing, and it would give a bunch of lat longs or a bunch of degree distance, like RNAV radial fixes. And those were probably the bane of everyone's existence. Those were awful. But if you're flying around, and I think he flies a 182, by the way, the higher you get, the easier it is to go direct to something way further down the line, right? And I remember in that picture of you in the 10 at 510, I saw Kalamazoo right there as your next fix, but you're still 250 miles away. But you're direct. But when you're down low, the problem is you get MEAs and all kinds of minimum altitudes that come into play, whatever they may be. And it's going to be really hard, because if you're going to try to file GPS fixes, you're going to have to be above all those off-route obstruction clearance altitudes or grid moras or, whatever's relevant at the time. And, mountainous areas, that's going to give you 2,000 feet or more. So I think the issue is more not so much what you file as fixes, but what altitude you try to do it at.
Absolutely. One of the things that I was thinking about while you were explaining that, Brandon, which I can't explain as well as you can, because I don't have near the SoCal experience that you do. But the tech routes are nice. Yes, it's a super congested area to go flying in, keeping in mind, separations, MEAs, altitudes, et cetera, that there's just it's just not feasible to be going GPS direct. But you're also, when you put something in a system on a tech route, the controller usually, they're published routes, like you said, and they're going to give it to you. It's going to be the exact same thing every single time you do it, because they know how many planes are going from A to B and A to C and A to D. So obviously you just can't put something in different every time. The cool thing is that it's going to be the same, but that's the not cool thing, right? But the other thing is when you're using the tech route, you're not trying to outguess a computer either. So in other words, when I file out of Dallas, I could file going to Monterey, California, like we always do. We generally get the same stuff. But when we're going to file somewhere we don't normally fly, and we look at it and we go, well, I'll file this, 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 and this, and it comes back a totally different routing, well, we're trying to outguess a computer. If you took the same day, the same situation, and the same deal, and you filed GPS Direct, it would still spit that same routing back to you. Not GPS Direct, but the same routing that we would get if we filed something that we didn't receive. So I've taken airplanes, for example, 2 different tail numbers of the same type, and I've literally filed on 2 different flightplan.com accounts, one direct, and I've done this, like say from Dallas to Phoenix, and one with some routing that I would choose or want to go on. And the ATC computer has spit out the same routing for both airplanes. Both not what I filed, but both exactly the same on what the computer, based on, I would assume, flow control would give you for that day or for what they were experiencing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a funny story. Here's some fun pull back the curtain stuff. So say you depart my airport and you're like, I'm going to go to, let's just say Telluride, right? And you have the experience that Chad has, that Chad's talking about, where you file direct or you file a routing, and really no matter what you do, you get something different. And that can be annoying, of course. So then the question comes up, well, maybe I should just not file a route because ATC is just going to tell me anyway. This is what this looks like on the other side of the coin, though. You file a route from, let's just say, Carlsbad to Telluride. So it's CRQ, straight to Tex, and nothing in between. Well, I'm going to hand you off to Departure. Departure is going to hand you off to LA Center. So we've now got 2 different letters of agreement that would have to have existed between all those facilities, me and the TRACON and the center, about how you're going to get handed off. So there has to be a route in there somewhere. And you say, well, great, why don't you just give me one? Well, I mean, it's not really air traffic's job to plan your flight for you. But here's the thing. If you put just one simple fix between here and there, let's just say Thermal, Julian, Needles, something like that. Thermal, by the way, would be a good one for that. Then it's fine, because as far as I'm concerned, you've got an exit fixed to the center. As far as the TRACON's concerned, you've got an exit fixed to the center. Their agreement with the center is they're probably going to have you going direct thermal, climbing to filed altitude or 210 or something, whatever the handoff is. And we don't necessarily know that, but there's going to be some sort of agreement there, right? And then after that, you're the center's problem. So if you file example A, nothing. Well, we all know that we just put thermal in there, but we're going to have to take a second to pull the strip, go into the FIDO, amend the system, or amend the flight plan in the system, send you on your way. Second, you file thermal direct. You might actually get that. You may get a reroute down the line, like after thermal, you're probably going to get direct cones or something like that, but you're going to get, it'd be very simple, like one extra fix. Example 3, you file a whole bunch of stuff. You're like, I want thermal, J something or other to Blue Mesa, J whatever, or Victor something to cones, and then this, and you put in a note that you want the localizer into runway 9, blah, blah, blah. Well, you may or may not get that. I don't know. I mean, if you want to do the runaround, fine. So what I would recommend is putting just something between here and there, but there's a lot of other stuff that goes into that. And like you said, flow, that's a big one. So we have tech routes, which is you're definitely going to get it. We have preferred routes, which is you're probably going to get it. And those are between major metro areas, like you said, Dallas, Phoenix, Chicago, New York, things like that. Very, very highly traveled routes. But then you also have some other weird ones that a lot of people don't know about. And one example that comes to mind is wind routes. So to take advantage of really high tailwinds or to avoid really high headwinds or things like that, there are these wind routes that get put into place sometimes so that you can take advantage of that, be a little more environmentally friendly, a little more operationally advantageous. And some of the centers over in that area are going to try to route you that way. So you may get a little bit of a reroute towards the end of the flight. But me at the tower that departed you, I'm not really going to care about that so much unless it's just a big reroute and I have to re-attune your clearance. And then, of course, there's weather. Weather pops up. Well, guess what? That's sort of just on the fly. I mean, you're getting something different, but, chances are you're the one who requested that, not just us sending you around it, right? So there's a ton of complexity here, and I realize how sort of irritating that can be for a pilot trying to file, but my recommendation would probably be put something in between and then still probably expect the reroute. But at least now with technology, you usually can get notified via your EFB or whatever you use when ATC reroutes you. So when you call for the clearance, be it amended or not, you probably still know what you're going to get.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I think is cool, let's just say half the people in this world, I guess, use ForeFlight and the other half of us use flightplan.com, but I've never used ForeFlight in my life. And I have nothing against ForeFlight at all. I just never used it. Flightplan.com, let's say we're sitting in a CRQ, Brandon, and we're going to go up to CMA. Just for example, we've done that a bunch. So if you're looking at flightplan.com and you pull it up, it's got the tech route in there. So you can see the tech routes that are sitting there or routes getting you from CRQ to CMA. When you go to hit your departure airport is CRQ, your destination airport is going to be CMA. You go to the next page and you're inputting all the information. Then you just scroll down to the bottom and it's got the routing down there for you. So you can see what you're going to get, or you can choose the routing. I think they have two. I want to say one keeps you inland, one keeps you out on the ocean. I may be wrong about the departure and destination, but I know there's a couple that keep you inland. There's a couple of destinations where you can choose to go out over the water. So
it's if you're a turbine, you're getting out of the water, and if you're a piston, you're not.
That's right. So, but those routings are in flightplan.com. If you swing down to the bottom, I know that flightplan.com makes it really easy. So there's no confusion.
Yeah, absolutely. And then just to throw one more monkey wrench into there, if you're so equipped and fast enough, there's a couple of them that are now, they have the number like the San Diego Papa 32 or 31 or whatever. There's some that have an R at the end, and those are the ones where you're going to get the RNAV departure SID, and it may have more, it'll be RNAV fixes instead of like the Seal Beach 272 radial to the Santa Monica 125 or something like that. It'll just be GPS fixes and probably a SID on there too.
Sure. Also, if you're in a TAA, most of that stuff is you can fly it in ping needles anyway now.
Absolutely, because we're getting to the point now where we're all children of the magenta line, right?
That's right.
I couldn't be happier that you said that, because there's actually a second part to this question. And this is also perhaps a discussion on moving on to a commercial ticket using a technically advanced aircraft. I believe now if you have an airplane that qualifies, that means the having to do it in a retractable gear aircraft requirement is eliminated. So that is basically true, yes. And I know a lot of the flight schools have happily ditched all their old Arrows and Moonies and 182 and 172 RGs and stuff that they were maintaining for all those years to have that one airplane to train people for their commercial check rides in. But what do you think about that change?
Well, I like the change. There has never been a situation I've been involved in or seen where the dropping a gear or raising a gear had been a problem for someone, although being trained right. I know we have gear up incidents out there. I know X, Y, and Z goes on. However, just given technology, training, the things that are out there, the importance of X, Y, and Z, most all of your twins are retractable anyway. So why would you need a commercial single that's a retract? I mean, what are you flying around in a commercial single that's retractable? Well, people go, well, commercially, there's a few TBMs, I guess, out there that are flown professionally. There's a lot of Pilatuses out there that are flown professionally. But there are a whole lot more Cessna Caravans that are flown out there professionally. Well, does a Caravan have a retractable gear on it? No. Well, when you kind of just space it out like that and you think about it, it's not really that important that for a single engine aircraft, you can grab a retractable gear airplane to get your commercial. The funny thing is, when I got my commercial, and this is what I always tell people, also the first listener question that we did, I believe I mentioned this, I suggested you get your multi-commercial first. Well, I did it that way because the rule was at the time, you had to get your single commercial in an RG. Well, I never flew an RG. I didn't have to because I went and got my multi first. When I got my multi first, that covered the retract. I got my single commercial in a 172 fixed gear.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of neat. And I mean, honestly, like pulling a gear handle it's one of those things where I can get why you'd want to have that sort of early on in your experience. And I get why, it was the closest thing we had at the time to sort of mimic what you'd be doing later on, I guess. I mean, I don't know. But I think now that requirement went away, it's probably, I don't think anybody misses it.
No, and it's not a contributor to accidents or incidents either.
I guess that's it for the listener questions. I really want to thank Evan and Brooks and Glenn for sending those in. That's pretty awesome. Thanks, guys.
And you know what? I'd like to thank those guys, too. I really like the listener questions. And all the listeners out there that are sending them in, y'all are certainly coming up with some excellent questions. And it also, believe it or not, it helps keep me on my toes hearing that stuff and then being able to respond to it.
For sure. Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, let's do this. So there's definitely going to be a next time that you're going to be back. So for next time, first off, I want to put it out there to everyone in listener land. What do you want Chad and I to talk about? What do you want to hear Chad's perspective on? And throw mine in there too. And what do you guys want to hear? Just let me know. Shoot me an email, brandonpodcastingonaplane.com. And Chad, what do you want to talk about next time you're here?
Next time I'm here, I just want to talk about how much we enjoy and love aviation and all the stuff that everybody else wants us to talk about. Because as long as we're talking about airplanes, aviation, and the industry, that's what I like talking about. And you know what? I have a question. I've got a question for the listeners out there. Is anybody out there have any drone questions? Do they want to talk about drones? Is there any drone flyers out there? Any unmanned flyers, et cetera, et cetera? Anybody operating a one, and does anybody have the certificate, the unmanned certificate out there? I think we'd like to hear from y'all.
That'd be kind of cool. I remember I did a couple drone episodes like way, way back when. I think like episode number 3 or 4 or something like that. So we should probably bring that back. Cool, man. Well, I'll let you get back to your ribs, and I hear screaming in my living room, so I should probably go.
We got to get back to real life, right? That occupies a lot of time.
That occupies most of it, actually, yes. So,
well, cool, man. All right, boss.
Yep. Take care.
I'll send you some pictures of the finished product.
I will absolutely put those on the blog post.
All right, do it.
Yeah, man. See ya.
I'll send them over. All right, take it easy, bro. We'll talk to you later.
So what do you think? I think we should take Chad up on his offer. How about you? What do you want us to talk about next time? Shoot me an email, brandonpodcastingonaplane.com. Or better yet, you can always use your smartphone or the SpeakPipe widget that pops up when you visit podcastingonaplane.com and record me something, and who knows, maybe it'll even end up on the show. And while you're on the website, maybe consider supporting the show too. If you find value in it, I'd really appreciate having you on board as a patron. You get episodes early, and sometimes other fun stuff too. And let's take a second on that note to welcome new patron Russ Irwin. He's a new show supporter. So Russ, welcome, and thank you. And if you're not into the recurring thing, that's cool. You could just maybe head over to buymeacoffee.com/Bravo Golf, spelled out, and do a one-time thing in increments of just $3. And if you want to stay sharp on the mic, make sure to use the affiliate code DELTA at plainenglishsim.com. It'll get you 10% off the best smartphone-based ATC comm simulator around. There's, of course, a link in the show notes. And as always, I thank you so much for your support, whatever form it takes, and for listening to the show and passing the word along about this or any of your favorite aviation podcasts to a friend. That's all for now. Your frequency change is approved until next time, and report back on this frequency for the next episode. Good day.
The Podcasting on a Plane podcast is presented for entertainment purposes only. Brandon's comments and those of his guests, the website's content, and any of the social media, etc., are not part of his official responsibility as a controller or as an FAA employee. The views and opinions you hear on the podcast are his, and those of his guests, and not necessarily that of the FAA. Also, while he's a CFI, he's not acting as your CFI, nor is he your mechanic, your doctor, your shrink, or your spouse. This podcast is presented for entertainment, camaraderie and fun, but is in no way, shape or form professional advice or legal counsel. If you're in need of professional advice, get some from somewhere more appropriate than a podcast, no matter how good this one may be.